right, here we go. Are you covenanted, part 48. Yeah. All right. Overwhelming. Okay. So as we get into part 48, it seems like I should probably remind everyone of some important things before we kind of get started. And I thought it'd be good to just get this in the recording. Okay? This is 48 parts. And there's a possibility, and I know it's none of you, but there's a possibility that some of you may be getting bored. And some of you might be wanting me to move on. And we are. We're moving on through the book of Romans right now. And some of you may be whatever. It doesn't matter. The point is this. I want to just encourage everyone two things. Remember what I said a long time ago, the teachings were designed to do. They're supposed to have you understand the subject so that you can do it, so you can defend it, and so that you can teach it. Okay? So you're going to have to hear these things over and over to get to the fourth level of this. So if you think I'm repeating myself or repeating certain points, you might want to first examine yourself to see if you actually are doing those things that you're all bored about and complaining about that, all right, I've heard that already. You know, you see a lot of that going on in the scriptures too. I heard that already, but are you doing it? And then there's a second point separate from that but connected to it, which is, you know what, maybe you are getting it. Maybe you've gotten it weeks ago. Hey, that's fantastic. But you know what? Some of you still need this. And so I want you to recognize that that's an incredibly selfish thought when you're not thinking about the fact that others may need this even if you don't. Some of you pick things up right away, other things you struggle with. The things you pick up right away, others are struggling with. So I don't want you to be all like, well, yeah, I got it already, Rabbi. Yeah, but not everybody has. Let them sit and learn, and you can sit there and appreciate that this time it wasn't for you, it was for somebody else. Not every message is for you. Actually, they all are. I'll say that louder. Actually, they all are. But you don't always recognize it. And so probably the ones that you're least interested in are the ones that you need the most. But because you're not in the right mindset, you're not receiving it. You're not seeing those key nuggets that others are going, oh, that was exactly what I needed, because you're like, yeah. You're missing stuff if you can have that attitude. I'm just encouraging you. I'm not trying to scold you or whatever. I'm saying you are doing yourself a terrible disservice if you can't appreciate that you need to hear things. Look, I'm not just making this idea up. You have a Bible. We call it the scriptures, whatever you call it. And in that Bible, your Creator who speaks to you in that Bible says things over and over and over and I can go on and on with the overs. Does he bore you? Some of you are thinking, yes, he does. Well, then you have a problem, don't you? But he says things over and over and over for a reason. We need to hear it over and over and over. So yes, we're in part 48 because these things are that important. And quite frankly, this stuff we're doing in Romans and in Corinthians that we did before that, many of you have never had it unraveled that way before, and you needed to hear that. And we're going to do more of that today as we continue in Romans. And so I really want to just encourage you, examine yourself and your approach and your attitude when you listen to these teachings. Maybe this isn't the one that lights up your life and says, the epiphany I needed is right there. But you know what? It might be doing that for somebody else. And that should be good enough for you. Be excited that somebody, if I'm saying it and you trust I'm anointed and appointed and Abba's giving me the words, that means somebody listening needed it, even if you don't think it's you. So you should be excited that somebody's getting what they're getting. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay? All right, so let's have that approach as we go through this. So, we're in chapter 8 of Romans. Now remember, what we've been dealing with in Romans is Paul is trying to deal with, I'm kind of doing a quick reset, a couple of issues going on. The two main issues being this warring between two factions, the Jewish believers and the Gentile believers, which we know there's no such thing as a Gentile believer. The Gentiles by becoming believers, and the Jews by becoming believers, all are Israel. We're going to really get into that more when we get to chapter 11. But there's a rift between those who came into it born Gentile and those who are born Jewish, born covenanted, so to speak. And we see that battle going on for about 8 chapters. Now, we also see a second thing, which is that Paul is dealing with 2 sets of laws. The law of sin and death, the law that rages in our members, that fleshly law of we think we know what's right and wrong, and that leads to death, versus the Torah, the instructions from above, from the creator of the universe, that leads to life. And now as we go here into chapter 8, we started to notice that it's starting to talk about this idea in verse 16 and 17 that we would be heirs, co-heirs with Messiah, and we're going to get much more into that as we get into chapter 11 eventually. And so that's our kind of context as we continue here. Now, I'm going to go back a little bit. I know we ended a little bit further on into the chapter, but I'm going to go back to verse 18 as we're going to reset when we start talking about creation and its groanings and the expectations. So let's look at 18. For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the esteem that is to be revealed in us. Now, Paul is saying very clearly here that they are suffering, and there's a lot of suffering going on at that present time. Do we see anything different today? No. So for all of you that maybe came through a church or a Christian system that kind of had you feel like, hey, just come and believe in Messiah and everything's going to come up roses and all your problems will be solved. And if they're not, then you must be doing something wrong, okay? He's saying, wait a minute, I reckon the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing. That's what we should be doing, is saying this suffering isn't even worth comparing to what is coming. Comparing, in other words, it's worth it. Comparing with the esteem that shall be revealed in us. Go back and listen to the endure teaching. Endure and receive the crown of life teaching. See, we need to be patiently going through this walk because it's a race that has to be run all the way to the end. Paul talks about that in other places. Run the race to finish the race, to win the race. And they'll go listen to the overcoming teaching. He who overcomes, all those wonderful things are listed in Revelation. It says in the conclusion of was to he who overcomes shall receive all these things. All those things that you're looking forward to are to the overcomer. Well, you wouldn't have to overcome if there wasn't anything to overcome. And so that stuff was going on in Rav Shaul and Paul's days, going on now. Can you say, as he's saying, that you reckon these sufferings, that you're reckoning these sufferings as nothing, as not even worth considering when compared to the esteem, the glory, the honor that will be revealed if you maintain the journey, if you complete the journey? That's really important. And we're going to talk about in here, in this section, as we go into chapters 8 and 9, that there's going to be verses that talk about how nothing can separate us from Messiah. This is true. Nothing can separate you from Messiah, but you can leave. You can separate yourself. No outside force can separate you unless you let it. We're going to get to that at some point here. So here we are dealing with these things, and we have to recognize that all that we're going through, as much as it's a suffering, and it's real, and it's palpable, and it's painful, and it's real, it's still, if you can have that mindset that it's not even worth even considering and letting it overwhelm you because the esteem that's going to be revealed in you later, if you just hold on and keep moving forward. Amen? Okay, so let's continue. He says, for the intense longing of the creation eagerly awaits for the revealing of the sons of Elohim. And it's not just the creation, meaning like all of the world and the universe and everything, but us too. We are absolutely intensely longing for what's coming, aren't we? At least you should be. And if you're not, you need to start examining yourself as to why do you not intensely long for what is coming. See, focusing on those things above helps you deal with those things below. When you focus on the things below, you forget about all the things above. We get it backwards. Focus as much as you can your attention on the things above, and you'll deal with the things below. Focus with the things above, and you'll deal with the things below. If you focus on the things below, you won't even be aware of the things above. That's when you get in trouble, because your attention is going to be on what you're dealing with below in the fleshly stuff. You will not be focusing correctly, and then that distraction will make you miss the mark on the things above. You'll lose your awareness on the things above. And so you won't be doing the things you need to do that have to do with the things above. So let's keep that in, kind of in our mind. It should be as frontless before our eyes. You got to remember, he says that these things, loving him with all our hearts, mind, body, etc., are supposed to be like frontless before our eyes. The words he's commanding us. We should have them always aware in our thoughts, is what that means. For the creation was subjected to futility, verse 20, not from choice, but because of him who subjected it in anticipation, that the creation itself also shall be delivered from the bondage to corruption into the esteemed freedom of the children of Elohim. Now notice, here it uses the word delivered instead of saved. See, same idea. We were delivered from bondage to corruption. We read that in Ephesians 2. Remember, several times in these teachings, we keep going back there. The idea that we were delivered even though we were starting off in our sin, in our corruption. How? Why is this going on? So that we can be delivered into the esteemed freedom of the children of Elohim. The freedom to choose the master to whom you serve, because we were told earlier that there is a changing of master going on here. Do you not know that your master to whom you serve? We read that also in the previous weeks. And so also we know from James's writings that there's a Torah of freedom. The law is the law of freedom. So he says here, for the creation was subjected to futility. And we were told in other places that we've been doing things in the futility of our own minds. When you were doing it your way, working under the law of sin and death, working under your own ideas of what was right and wrong, that was the efforts in futility. But now we're doing things that actually are productive and will bring life. If we just subject ourselves to his will, his understanding, and do it his way. Isn't that the covenant? If you agree to do it my way, then it won't be futile. It'll actually produce the fruit that you've always wanted. I will take care of all things, he says. You will be my people. Verse 22, for we know that all the creation groans together and suffers the pains of childbirth together until now. And again, it's not just talking about the universe or the world in some metaphoric way. We are all groaning. I've heard you groaning. And not always is it because you're hungry, okay? Life is hard, and I've said, and apparently we're not very good at it, okay? Life's tough, and we groan because we're anticipating and waiting, and Abba, come now. Messiah, come now. Bring the kingdom now. Enough of this already. We all have those moments where we groan. And not only so, but even we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, we ourselves also groan within ourselves, eagerly waiting for the adoption, the redemption of our body. Okay, so now we're going to start getting some more of this metaphor of adoption. And so the idea being, because remember we talked about in verse 16, it said the Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are the children of Elohim. And if children, also heirs, truly heirs of Elohim. This idea of heirs through adoption, we're seeing that going on. And he says that we, not just the people of the world, not just the world itself, but we, even those of the first fruits, groan within ourselves, eagerly waiting for the adoption. Not the adoption in sort of type, which is we're going to see the grafting together in Romans 11. But the real adoption that comes when we are transformed and conformed into his image and we are taking off the corruptible and putting on the incorruptible. That real adoption. He says, for in this expectation we were delivered, but expectation that is seen is not expectation, for when anyone sees, does he expect it? So he's saying is, if you already see it, if you already have it, then you're not expecting anything. This is the problem. That's why the Are You Saved teaching is so important. See, they are teaching out there that you're saved now, so there's no expectation. So you're not making the effort. We make the effort because of the expectation of ultimately being saved. You've been delivered, you're being delivered, and ultimately will be. So you can say you've been saved, you're being saved, and you will be saved. But when you talk about it and receive it as a finished, sort of completed term, guess what you're not going to do? You're not going to be doing anything because you have already seen the expectation. And if you've seen it, does he expect it? No. But if we expect what we do not see, we eagerly wait for it with endurance. See, some of you maybe have not read this section this way before. But it's all about that idea of being saved is going on here. For in this expectation, we were saved or delivered. But expectation that is not expectation, but expectation that is seen is not expectation. In other words, if you think you've already got it, then what are you expecting? So be careful with that. So Paul's making this really clear if you can receive what he's saying. All right? And if we expect what we do not see, we eagerly wait for it with endurance. And in the same way, the Spirit, the Ruach, does help in our weaknesses. For we do not know what we should pray, but the Spirit itself pleads our case for us with groanings unutterable. Now, bear in mind, for all you Pentecostals or former Messicostals or whatever you are out there, charismatics, it says the groanings are unutterable. These are not groanings that you utter. These are not languages. These are not tongues. These are not moanings and weird. He says these are unutterable. You are not speaking them. I think people confuse this verse badly. Okay? Yes. Think of it when, have you ever been in so much pain and misery that you can't even speak? And someone comes up to you and sees you in that pain and misery, and all you can do is go, because you can't even, just sound is coming out with no words, nothing uttered. You're just moaning. You're just in so much pain, you just can't even put words to it. I'm not talking about some language like people think about in the charismatics. I'm talking about you really can't put anything to it. All that's coming out of you is a groan. Because he says, look, in the same way the Ruach does help us in our weaknesses, for we do not know what we should pray, but the Spirit pleads our case. See, this is one of those things that Kenneth Copeland, those guys all quote this verse. When we don't know what to pray, the Spirit will... No, but it's groanings unutterable. So if you're uttering them, then that's not what he's talking about. Is it not that simple? Okay? The Word of Faith guys quote this verse all the time. When we don't know what to pray, then we have to pray in the Spirit. No, that is not what it says here. It says the Spirit is going to do this, not you. And make intervention. The Spirit's going to plead our case for us. Not you, or you make, it says unutterable. There's nothing for you to say here. You're just moaning in pain. We've all seen that in our children, right? So maybe they hurt themselves or they fall or do something, and all they're doing is just laying there like, what? And you want to get them to tell you what's wrong, and they can't. They're just in such pain. All they do is moan. This is what he's talking about. And remember, this is linked to, I reckon the sufferings of this present time. So we're suffering. Yet he says, but if you have eagerness and you've got anticipation and expectation, you can handle the sufferings because of the expectation. And don't worry about what to pray. The Ruach understands what you're going through and will make intercession. But nothing's coming out of your mouth. Not in this section anyway. This is when you can't have words, when there are no words. Because Abba knows what's going on in your life intimately. And so the Spirit is going to go ahead and make our case, plead our case for us with groanings unutterable. And it searches, and he who searches the hearts knows what the mind of the Spirit is, because he makes intercession for the set apart ones according to Elohim. He who searches the hearts. Who's the he who searches the hearts? Yahweh. See, that's another thing I'm sure is not taught that way. How many verses do you see in the Tanakh where it says that he searches our hearts and tests our kidneys and checks and understands what's our gut, where we are in things? Who's the one who searches the hearts? Yahweh does. He says, Yahweh who searches the hearts knows what the mind of the Ruach is. He knows what the Ruach is thinking. It's connected. It's part of its connection with him. He says, because he makes intercession for the set apart ones according to Elohim. And we know that all matters work together for good to those who love Elohim, to those who are called according to his purpose, because those whom he knew beforehand, again, we're talking about the same he as in verse 27. Those whom he, Yahweh, knew beforehand, he also ordained beforehand to be conformed to the likeness of his Son, for him to be the firstborn among many brothers. For whom he ordained beforehand, these he also called. And whom he called, these he also declared right. And whom he declared right, these he also esteemed. Now, You got to follow along here because he does explain this a little bit. Verse 29 gets a little, and 30 gets a little confusing when it says, ordained beforehand. Right? In verse 29 it says, because those whom he knew beforehand, he also ordained beforehand. Which ones? The ones who he called. Verse 30 explains it. Because some of you make it confused in verse 29. Well, who did he ordain beforehand? The ones who he knew would make it if he gave them the opportunity and opened their eyes and ears. The ones he chose, the timing to open their eyes and their ears. So he calls them. And the ones whom he called, then he declares them right because as they respond to the call. They're not just declared right just because he called them and just they did nothing. He's really abbreviating a huge process into like one sentence. He's giving you the whole process in like one sentence. He knows you. He knows the end from the beginning. He ordains and pre-selects you, opens your eyes, opens your ears, opens your heart. You now make choices, and in those choices, in being called, you respond and you get declared right. And in getting declared right, you are also glorified or honored, esteemed. Did you follow that? Now, he says, what then shall we say to this? If Elohim is for us, who is against us? In other words, he's saying, look, this is all connected to the idea of we are suffering, and those suffering should not be a distraction from what we're supposed to be doing. So he's going to round that off with, if Elohim is for us, like he knew what we'd be going through. He knew where we were when he called us. He knew what our life journey would look like. Yet he chose to open our eyes and ears and call us because he knew. So when it says when he ordained beforehand, in other words, he knows the end from the beginning. So he knows what you're going to do, where you're going to go, what choices you're going to make. And then he chose to pick you at that moment and open your eyes and heart and ears, whatever, to reveal himself to you. He chose that moment to reveal himself to you. And so that's why we can look at this process of because he ordained it from beforehand, he ordained beforehand, he called, and from being called, then there's a declaration of being made right, and after being declared right, we're then esteemed. That's a process that he really briefly, super briefly, puts in this really abbreviated thing. So he says in verse 32 now, truly, he who did not spare his own son, but delivered him up on behalf of us all, how shall he not, along with him, freely give us all else? In other words, we're doing this as imitators of Messiah. We're following this process, and he's trying to say, look, if he did it for Yeshua and went through what he did, he'll do it for you. Because this is an adoption process. So you get treated like his son. He's allowing you to suffer. Yeshua suffered. Yeshua died and was resurrected. He's saying you can die and be resurrected. He said, how much more would he not give us all else? Who shall bring any charge against Elohim's chosen? Now this is going back to that rift that's going on, people attacking the chosen ones. Who is he who who shall bring any charge against Elohim's chosen ones? It is Elohim who is declaring right. Who is he who is condemning? It is Messiah who died. And furthermore, is also raised up, who is also at the right hand of Elohim, who also makes intercession for us. Wait a minute, Messiah makes intercession for us. And so it says the Spirit in verse 27 makes intercession for us. And John 14 tells us that he's going to send a helper, the Ruach, the Spirit that will be there to help us. And then he says that he will not leave us orphans. Can you not see that this is still referring to Yeshua? Through the means by which called the Ruach. You don't understand what I'm talking about? You need to listen to Do You Know the Father and the Son and understanding the Ruach. Okay? Now, actually, with all of this suffering and the process with that, you probably need to listen to baptism of fire to understand that process. Okay? I think Marty was telling me the other day that last teaching I mentioned like 10 other teachings, so we'll see if we can break the record. All right. Here we go. So what's happening here is that there's this problem in verse 34. Who is he who is condemning? So in other words, there are people attacking each other. That was the problem all throughout the first 7 chapters here in Romans, that there's this rift and fighting and pointing of fingers and condemning that's going on. He says, hold on a second. Verse 35. Who shall separate us from the love of Messiah? Shall pressure or distress or persecution or scarcity of food or nakedness or danger or sword? As it has been written, for your sake we are killed all day long. We are reckoned as sheep of slaughter. But in all this, we are more than overcomers through him who loved us. In all this, we should be more than overcomers. Go back and listen to the overcoming teaching, right? He says, for I am persuaded that neither death, nor life, nor messengers, nor principalities, nor powers, neither the present, nor the future, nor height, nor depth, nor any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of Elohim, which is in Messiah Yeshua, our Master. Nothing will separate us from his love. You can separate yourself from him. Look, if you're not sure what I'm talking about, go to John 15. He says, all who stay in me and those who don't stay in me get burned up in the fire. Maybe we should just go there real quickly to John 15. Just want to make sure you understand that you can leave. Some of you once saved, always saved people who don't understand that whole process. You don't understand. There's no reason to tell anybody to stay unless they can leave. Let me just quickly write in my notes. We're going to John 15. Okay? In John 15, verse 1, I am the true vine. My Father is the gardener. Every branch in me that bears no fruit, he takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, he prunes so that it bears more fruit. He says, you are already clean because of the word which I have spoken to you. Now listen to verse 4. Stay in me, and I stay in you. Why would he tell you to stay unless you could leave? Look at verse 6. If anyone does not stay in me, wait a minute, it's possible to not stay in him. I don't know if I'm reading this wrong. Maybe you're reading it wrong. I think it's straightforward and clear. Messiah is saying, if anyone does not stay, that's got to be what you call a saved person, those of you that come from that place. That's got to be what you call a believer. That's got to be what you call a person who's covenanted or whatever. It's someone, why would you say stay unless you had to be in there in the first place? You had to come in. And he says, now when you're in, you need to stay because you can leave. It's very important that we understand. He says, verse 7, if you stay in me, by the way, the one who doesn't stay in, what happens? He's thrown away. He's a branch that dries up, and they gather them and throw them into the fire, and they're burned. So much for once saved, always saved. Okay, but verse 7, but if you stay in me, and my words, see, it's not just staying in him, claiming, well, I'm in him, I believe in Messiah, I'm of Messiah. No, and my words stay in you. He says, then you shall ask whatever you wish and it shall be done for you. Okay? You've got to be walking this out. His words have to stay in you, and you have to live by them. Those that say they know him and do not keep his commandments are liars, and the truth is not in them. 1 John. Let's remember these things, right? Let's go back to Romans. Okay, so he's making this case. Say, look, you're going to go through, let's go to verse 35 again, pressure, distress, persecution, scarcity of food, nakedness, danger, sword. You're going to go through all of these things. And guess what? Going through them should not be, the issue as far as you leaving or anybody pushing you away. You should be able to handle all that stuff. And in handling all that stuff, you should be able to, give me a second, I'm looking for something at the same time. I want to take us to something that fits right in with it if you give me a second to find it. In Matthew, okay, got it? All right, so let me say where I'm going with this. All right, he said, right, pressure, distress, persecution, scarcity of food, nakedness, danger, sword. None of these things should separate you from Messiah, and they can't in themselves. Those things in themselves can't. Pressure, distress, do those things sound like a parable? What parable does that sound like? The sower, the seed, good. So if you go to Matthew 13, which is where I was just kind of remembering to go look for real quick. Sorry, as I'm putting the teaching together as I'm teaching you. Okay? But if you look at verse 20, all right? It says, and that sown on rocky places, this is he who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy, yet he has no root in himself. but is short-lived, and when pressure or persecution arises because of the word, immediately he stumbles. You think Paul understood all these things? Absolutely. Okay? Absolutely. And see, this is, by the way, if you want to understand what it looks like to see the Ruach at work, that was it. It stirs to remembrance, not in my notes. You can do these same things, be open to it, but you got to put this stuff in so that when key words pop up like persecution and pressure, wow, it's exactly the same words right there in the sower of the seed. Of course, as I put the teaching together, he didn't give it to me until now. Sometimes it takes me reading it out loud in front of you guys and just getting out of the way. And that's the way he operates with me. But, just understand that that's what we talk about. We're looking at verses here in chapter 8 of Romans, and he says the exact same thing. Pressure, distress, and persecution. Are you going to be the one who, because of the word, stumbles? It says, yet he has no root in himself. In other words, it's surface. You got excited. You like the idea of not burning and having death, and you like the idea of eternal hell. You like the idea of having every tear wiped away. You loved all that stuff, and so you got excited about it, but you didn't understand that the other part of this, the suffering part, was included, at least in this fleshly life. You didn't read the whole agreement. Yeshua said, I suffered, you'll suffer too. Paul's telling us the same thing here in Romans. And so you need to have that all clear, okay? But just remember, none of these things shall be able to separate us from the love of Elohim, which is in Messiah Yeshua our Master, unless we allow it to separate ourselves. Not that he'll stop loving us, we will separate ourselves from him. What choices are you going to make? Are you going to leave? Are you going to make choices that create a separation between you and Messiah? This is really important. All right, chapter 9. I speak the truth in Messiah, I do not lie, my conscience also bearing me witness in the set-apart spirit, that I have great sadness and continual grief in my heart, for I myself could have wished to be banished from Messiah for the sake of my brothers, my relatives according to the flesh, who are Israelites. So now he's going to get into, we're really building up to this two groups coming together in chapter 11. Okay, we're really building up to it now. So now he's going to talk about his side, his brothers. He noticed that he refers to, he's a Benjamite, but he refers to his brothers, he says they are Israelites. Now listen to the way he describes them. Verse 4, they are Israelites, whose is the adoption and the esteem and the covenants. We finally got to one of the covenant verses, right? Verse 9 of chapter 4, verse 4 for chapter 9. And the giving of the Torah, the law, and the worship, and the promises, who are the fathers, and from whom is the Messiah according to the flesh, who is over all. Elohim be blessed forever. Amen. So he's trying to say, look, I would give myself up for these people. I would give myself up. I would take whatever would be necessary so that they would see and own what they need to own so they could do what they need to do to be properly in covenant. He said, but my brothers, they've made mistakes. He says, however, verse 6, it is not as though the word of Elohim has failed. For they, listen now, because people say, oh, well, they blew it. This is the Christian mindset as well. The Jews blew it. He says, oh, no. He says, it's not as though the word of Elohim has failed. Elohim made promises. That word does not fail. He says, for they are not all Israel who are Israel. Now, this is being used by racists all over the world. It's used by a lot of people to kind of point, the black Hebrew Israelites do this, and other segments do this. A lot of that replacement theology that does this. Oh, when they want to attack the anti-Semitic guys, want to say that the Jews aren't really the Jews. That's not what he's talking about. There's Israel by birth, and there's Israel by covenant. He's saying they are absolutely Israel by birth. They're not Israel by choice. Okay, you could be born here in America, and you can choose to go move and live in another country. Although you're American by birth, but not an American by choice. You see what I'm saying? He says, not all Israel are Israel. So he says, not all who are born Israel are actually covenanting to be Israel. So let's understand that. Neither are they all children because they are the seed of Abraham. He's making it more clear in verse 7. Just because they're the seed of Abraham doesn't make them all children, but in Yitzchak your seed shall be called. Now, why does he mention Yitzchak? Why does he mention Isaac? Okay, he mentions Isaac because it then goes to Jacob, and we're going to see that in a minute here. But he mentions Isaac because through Yitzchak, he says, not through who you thought, through your other child, but through the child that I'm going to. I'm making the choices. Yahweh's making the choices. He says, now watch. He says, that is, those who are children of the flesh that are not children of Elohim, but the children of the promise are reckoned as the seed. For this is the word of the promise. At this time I shall come, and Sarah shall have a son. And not only so, but Rivkah, having conceived by one, our father Isaac, yet before they were born or had done any good. Now he's going to explain this whole children of promise thing. Notice what happens. Before they were born, who was born? Jacob and Esau. All right? Before they were born, he said, in order that the purpose of Elohim according to choice, that's the issue here. Not according to bloodline or birth order, but according to choice. That's what Paul's talking about here, is your choices, those who would choose to be or not to be Israel or covenanted. He says, in order that the purpose of Elohim according to choice might stand, not of works, but of him who calls. So again, not of works, meaning not of the fact that they're born in the right order. In other words, not in a thing that was done, but by choice to do. He said, it was said to her, the greater shall serve the lesser. As it has been written, Yaakov I have loved, but Esau I have hated. What then shall we say? Is there unrighteousness with Elohim? Let it not be. Because again, you remember this shifting thing that's going on here. You know, the Jews may say it's wrong to let the Gentiles in because, hey, it's our thing. The Gentiles will be sitting there going, no, you guys blew it. All of that could look like some sort of unrighteousness with Elohim. He says, no, let it not be. For he who says to Moshe, I shall favor whomever I favor, I shall have compassion on whoever I have compassion. So then it is not of him who is wishing, nor of him who is running, but of Elohim who shows favor. He says, look, I get to choose. In other words, now bear in mind, this is not those who are already chosen saying it doesn't matter what they do. He says, what you do doesn't force me to choose you. Did you follow that? Some will read this and say, oh, well, it doesn't matter what you do. He chooses to give favor or not. No, he's not saying that. He says, look, it's not of those who are running. It's not of those who are wishing, nor whatever, that he then chooses. He just chooses who he chooses. So he doesn't choose you just because you're Israel by birth. He chooses you because he chooses you. He shall have favor on who he chooses. He'll have compassion on who he chooses. You don't get a say in it. But don't read more into this. This is still talking about beforehand stuff. Before they were born, he chose. Right? So he has chosen you also from before. He knows what you're going to do. Why did he choose Jacob over Esau before in the womb? Because he knew what they would do. Why did he call you before you were born? And he knew before you were born what you would do. And he knew exactly when he would poke you and disturb your peace. He knew exactly when he would wake you up and open your eyes and open your ears, etc. But it wasn't because of where you were born or when you were born or who you were born to or any kind of bloodline thing or any kind of wonderful thing you'd done in your life up to that point. In other words, you didn't earn that part. He called you knowing what you would do afterward. That you would be worthy of the calling afterward. Make sense? He says here, for the scripture says to Pharaoh, for this same purpose I have raised you up to show my power in you, that my name be declared in all the earth. So then he favors whom he wishes and he hardens whom he wishes. Then you shall say to me, in other words, when he says Pharaoh, he's saying, look, even the man is the king. He said that didn't make him special to be called to good stuff and everything else. He used him to show his power. Pharaoh didn't get any special treatment just because he was a Pharaoh. He says, so then he favors whom he wishes, and he hardens whom he wishes. Then you shall say to me, why does he still find fault? For who has resisted his counsel? But who are you, O man, to talk back to Elohim? So you guys think I'm tough. You guys would have loved to have Paul. Paul called the Galatians a bunch of fools, called them stupid. Right there, you read it, right there in the verses. Here he's talking to the Romans, he's saying, look, some of you guys are talking back to Elohim because you think you know better. You think he's wrong about something. But who are you, O man, to talk back to Elohim? Shall that which is formed say to him who formed it, why have you made me like this? And that's what he's talking about. He's like, why have you called me as a Gentile? Why did you call me as a Jew? Why did you call me at 60 years old? Why didn't you call me at 15 years old? Why did you call me after I lived such a crappy life and did all these dumb things? Why did you call me after I've been married 3 times? Why did you call me? Keep filling in all of that stuff. Now you're questioning his wisdom. So are you arguing with him? Are you talking back to him? Instead of saying, thank you for calling me when you did. Your timing is perfect always, and who am I to question it? He says, does the potter have authority over the clay? From the same lump to make one vessel for value and another for not for value? And if Elohim desire, this also goes to the idea that there are people out there that want to say, oh no, God is love and he loves everybody and it doesn't really matter. No, some vessels he has chosen for value and others not for value. That doesn't sound fair and right. We don't understand all of what he does. His ways are above our ways as the heavens above the earth. His thoughts above our thoughts. Same idea. He says, you're the lump, you're the clay. You're going to talk to the potter and say, I don't like the way you made me. Why have you made me like this? And if Elohim, desiring to show wrath and to make his power known, with much patience tolerated the vessels of wrath prepared for destruction, and that he might make known the riches of his esteem on vessels of compassion, which he had prepared beforehand for esteem, even whom he called, not only us of the Yehudim, but also of the Gentiles. So in other words, look, remember, he let the Jews, the Israelites, suffer in Egypt before he had his esteem revealed through Pharaoh and through the plagues as he brought them out. So not only does he choose who to have compassion on, but he chooses when. He allowed them to be there for a long time under Pharaoh. But then he called them out. As he says in Hosea, also, I shall call them my people who are not my people. Remember we talked about that before? Lo ruchama, lo ami. He said, I shall call them my people who are not my people, and her beloved who is not beloved. And it shall be in the place where it was said to them, you are not my people, they shall be called the sons of the living Elohim. This is Hosea chapter 2. I have it in my notes, verse 23, so I'm assuming that's probably right. It was handwritten in here. So, okay. But remember the timing of that. These are his people. Then they became not his people. But then he said that at some point in the future, it will be said that these are my people, the children of the living Elohim, because he has a plan. And if you don't understand the plan, go back to the discovering your identity teachings, okay? And I'll explain all of that in great detail. All right. I lost my place. Okay, verse 27. And Yeshayahu, Isaiah, cries out on behalf of Israel, though the number of the children of Israel be as the sand of the sea, the remnant shall be saved. So again, he's saying, look, yes, though they be as numerous as the sand of the sea, a remnant, which is a small piece, shall be delivered, shall be saved. So even when they were cast out, even when he said, not my people, there was always this remnant to be there. Look, when he wanted to mess up, not mess up, but when Solomon had messed up, when Shlomo had messed up and he was going to take the kingdom away, he said, I'm going to still hold one piece for David HaMelech, for King David's sake, and keep Judah going, even though I would cast them all out at that point. But he took the 10 and separated them and kept the 2 in the south for David's sake. There's a remnant. Okay, there's a remnant. By the way, that remnant matches the 2 spies and the 10 spies of the 12, right? Okay. Continuing here. For he is bringing a matter to an end and is cutting it short in righteousness, because Yahweh shall cut short a matter on the earth. And as Isaiah said before, if Yahweh of hosts had not left us a seed, we would not have become like Sodom and we would have become like Sodom and would have become like Gomorrah. In other words, there always needed to be a seed to lead us an example so that we can have a path. We're told that the scepter, we're told that a teacher would not depart from Judah's feet until the coming of Messiah, until the finishing of all things, so that we would have a way to know where the path is. You can't get there if you don't know the way. And we have the way through the Word. You have to know from the Word how to get there. What is the path? He says, what shall we say then? That Gentiles not following after righteousness, having obtained righteousness, even the righteousness of belief, but Israel following after the Torah of righteousness, has not arrived at the Torah of righteousness? So he's saying, so what should we say then? That Gentiles, because they found their way here, now they're great, but the Jews who were started off with it, now they're garbage? He's saying, no, both groups, if you find righteousness, can be in the same place. Why? Because it was not a belief, but as by works of Torah, for they stumbled at the stone of stumbling. So he's saying, look, you're picking on the Jews because they stumbled. Guess what? He says, and remember back to Ephesians, you were without Messiah, without the covenants, and you were without Elohim in the world until he called you out of all that mess. Israel didn't stay in me. But you know what? They can come back. It's called teshuvah. He says, as has been written in verse 33, see, I lay in Zion a stone of stumbling and a rock that makes for falling, and everyone who is believing on him shall not be put to shame. The problem is, Israel had belief issues. They had some of the mechanics down, but they always had belief issues, and because of belief issues, they messed up the actions. They brought paganism in, they brought idolatry in, they didn't trust Yahweh to protect them. They did all kinds of things they shouldn't do, even though they kept some of it. There should be a lesson to all of you. Keeping some of it doesn't get you like a passing grade. Okay? You're not getting into the kingdom with a C or a B minus. Now, you may be a C or a B minus, but you have to be the one that's striving, in Deuteronomy 8:2, making the effort to get the A. You shouldn't just be walking around going, well, I'm passing, I got a B. The B is not the problem, or the C. Some of you struggle a lot. You came from some places that really make it hard for you to do all of this. Fine, so go through your struggles. But have the Deuteronomy 8:2, where he's testing you to see whether it's in your heart to want the A. That's what it's all about, demonstrating the desire to be perfect, not that you're going to be perfect. So you might be a B minus or a C or whatever, but do you want to be perfect? Are you making the effort? And by the way, maybe you started out as an F or a D, and being at a C or a C minus is progress. Maybe in a couple of years you'll be a C or a B minus. Keep moving. Keep going forward. Keep wanting to get there, to receive the crown, right? This is important as we go through this. Chapter 10. Truly, brothers, my heart's desire and prayer to Elohim for Israel is for deliverance. Now, he's talking about Israel here. He's talking about bloodline Israel. For I bear them witness that they have an ardor for Elohim, but not according to knowledge. For not knowing the righteousness of Elohim and seeking to establish their own righteousness, they did not subject themselves to the righteousness of Elohim. Do we understand that's what's going on here? And we still have people today doing this like rampantly. It's all over the place. They did not, listen, do according to relationship. Knowledge in a relational way. Remember, we talked about this over and over. Knowledge can be informational or relational. The Jews at the time that he was dealing with were doing it informationally, not relationally. If you love me, keep my commandments. Those who say they know me and do not keep the commandments, to say they know him and don't keep the commandments are liars. They're lying about their relationship. They don't know him. Okay, so again, in 1 John, he makes it really clear. He says, the one who says, I know him, verse 4 of 1 John 2. This is right after he says, and by this we know that we know him if we guard his commands. This is a relational idea. John knew the same thing that Paul knew. that one who says, I know him, and doesn't guard the commands is lying, and the truth is not in him. But whoever guards his word, truly the love of Elohim has been perfected in him. And by this we know that we are in him. The one who says he stays in him ought to himself also walk, even as he walked. The problem that Israel had, the bloodline Israel, is that, and this happened all the way back in Egypt. And when they came out of Egypt, that same problem happened through the wilderness. And we're reading this now in the Torah portions. They did not have that good, knowing relationship. They kept wanting to do things their way. For not knowing and having a relationship with the right things of Elohim, the righteousness of Elohim, and seeking to establish their own righteousness, not righteousness meaning like doing it like through works, and the church will tell you this is all about them trying to do things through works. No, they had to do the works. That was the covenant. But they were starting to bend and twist it to their own way of doing it. And this is where they got into all kinds of trouble. Some of you have used this sentence. This sentence is trouble incarnate. Well, I'm sure he's okay with this. He knows my heart. That already means you're off trying to do your own righteousness. You're trying to bend and twist and justify something you want to do that's not exactly what he said you should do. Or justify not doing something he said to do because you don't want to do it. And that's what the Jews were doing. So he says, look, for not knowing or having a deep relationship with the righteousness of Elohim, they had information, not relationship, and seeking to establish their own righteousness, they did not subject themselves. That's the key. They didn't subject themselves to the righteousness of Elohim. For Messiah is the goal of the Torah unto righteousness to everyone who believes. Now, Messiah being the goal doesn't say, this is where Christianity really gets in trouble. The goal wasn't to get you to Messiah coming and revealing himself and dying and being resurrected. The goal was to become him. Okay, it says the Messiah is the goal of the Torah. The Torah's goal is to have you, how many times have I said this? What does Torah do? Torah observance, it blesses you, it keeps you safe, and it's the instrument, the vehicle that transforms you from what you are into the goal, into him. For the Messiah is the goal of the Torah, onto doing, so that you would do righteousness. What righteousness? The one that's in verse 3. Not some new thing. Verse 3 is talking about Torah observance in a relational way, subjecting yourselves to it. They mechanically did it without subjecting themselves. They were not relinquishing their sovereignty to him in the way that they did their stuff. He says, for Moses writes about the righteousness which is of Torah. The man who does these things shall live by them. Well, actually, he says it in a different way. He says, if you do these things, you shall live. So I think this could be a slight misquote here. But, because Moses is telling us, do these things and live. He says, I lay before you life and death, choose life. But the righteousness of belief speaks in this way. Do not say in your heart, who shall ascend into the heavens, that is to bring Messiah down, or who shall descend into the abyss, that is to bring Messiah up from the dead. But what does it say? The word is near you, in your mouth and in your heart. That is the word of belief, which we are proclaiming. Up, stop, time out, hold right here. Let's go and see what Moses actually said. In Deuteronomy chapter 30. Okay? So go to Deuteronomy 30. Another one that's not in my notes. Hold on. Okay, so after that, they've been driven out from where they had been. Okay? I guess we're going to start in verse 1. Well, we got some time. And it shall be, when all these words come upon you in verse 1, the blessing and the curse. Remember, we just had that in chapter 28 of Deuteronomy, is the blessing and the curse. Some of you don't remember that, I'm telling you. Chapter 28 is the blessing and the cursing. So here we are now in chapter 30. He says, and when all of this has come upon you, and all these words come upon you, the blessing and the curse, which I've set before you, and you shall bring them back to your heart among all the Gentiles where Yahweh your Elohim has driven you, and shall turn back. Wait a minute, is this not talking about Paul's time? Okay, this is prophetically referring to what Paul's dealing with. So we know that Paul is quoting Moses in chapter 30, is dealing with exactly what Deuteronomy is talking about, what Moses is talking about. He says, and when you Turn back, when he's bringing you back, and you shall turn back to Yahweh your Elohim and obey his voice. That is covenantal, above all, key phrase, covenantal phrase. Exodus 19, if you agree to obey my voice, I will take you as my people. So when we turn around and start obeying his voice. So what did he say? He said the Torah, he said the commandments. According to all that I command you today, with all your heart being and all your children, you and your children, then Yahweh your Elohim shall turn back your captivity and shall have compassion on you, because he has compassion on whom he chooses, and shall turn back and gather you from all the peoples where Yahweh scattered you. If any of you are driven out to the farthest parts under the heavens, from there Yahweh your Elohim shall gather you, and from there he does take you. And Yahweh your Elohim shall bring you to the land which your fathers possessed, and you shall possess it. And he shall do good to you and increase you more than your fathers. And Yahweh your Elohim shall circumcise your heart. For all of those of you who don't believe circumcision of heart is an Old Testament concept. And the heart of your seed, to love Yahweh your Elohim with your heart and with your being, so that you might live. See, there's the whole point, is that you shall have life. And Yahweh your Elohim shall put all these curses on your enemies and those who hate you, who persecuted you. And you shall turn back and obey the voice of Yahweh and do all his commands which I commanded you. In case you weren't clear, you're going to at that time obey his voice and do all the commandments that Moses taught. Not that we're done away with and nailed to the cross and all this other nonsense. You're going to do what Moses taught. Okay, verse 9. And Yahweh your Elohim shall make you have excess in all your works of your hands, and the fruit of your body, and the fruit of your livestock, and the fruit of the ground for good. For Yahweh turns back to rejoice over you for good, as he rejoiced over your fathers, if you obey the voice of Yahweh your Elohim, to guard his commands and his laws, which are written in this book of the Torah, if you turn back to Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart and with all your being. Is this confusing? Only by the fact that the people who are reading Romans are not connecting when he says he's quoting Moses to go back and see what Moses was talking about. Moses was talking about Torah observance. But now let's see where it goes. He says, verse 11, for this command which I'm commanding you today is not too hard for you nor far off. Let's see what he says here. And we're going to kind of go back and forth to Romans, okay? So he says, well, actually, it's a little bit further down. Okay, so it's not too far for you, it's not too hard for you, it's not far off. It is not in the heavens to say, who shall ascend to the heavens for us and bring it to us, nor cause us to hear it so that we do it. Nor is it beyond the sea to say, who shall bring it over from the sea for us and bring it to us and cause us to hear it so that we do it. For the word is very near you, in your mouth and your heart to do it. Now, hold on. Now, Paul quotes this differently. He says, do not say in your heart, who shall ascend to the heavens? That's the same. That is to bring Messiah down. Oh, because Messiah is the walking, talking, living Torah. He's the Word made flesh, the Torah made flesh. Because it's very clear that Moses says, he says, who's going to ascend into the heavens for us to bring it to us? What's the it? Well, he's talking about in verse 10, the book of the Torah, the laws, etc., that they may have lost contact with. And here he's referring to, Paul is calling that Messiah. And who shall descend into the abyss? That is to bring Messiah up from the dead. Well, what does it say? The word is near you, in your mouth and in your heart. That is the word of belief. He's calling what Moses is talking about the word of belief. Oh, isn't that different than what you heard on Sunday? He's calling what Moses said the word of belief. The problem is his Jewish brothers were not keeping it that way. He says, see, we're back in Deuteronomy, I set before you today life and good, death and evil, and that I am commanding you today to love Yahweh your Elohim, to walk in his ways, to guard his commands, his laws, his right rulings, and you shall live and increase, and Yahweh your Elohim shall bless you in the land in which you go to possess. But if your heart turns away and you do not obey, I shall be drawn away and shall bow down to other mighty ones and serve them. I have declared to you that I will take away the Torah because it's the problem and give you Messiah, and then you won't have these issues anymore. Oh, see, I was wrong, I guess. But if your heart turns away and you do not obey and shall be drawn away and bow down to other mighty ones, I have declared to you today that you shall certainly perish. And you shall not prolong your days in the land which you are passing over the Jordan to enter and possess. I have called the heavens and earth as witnesses against you. Today against you I have set before you life and death, the blessing and the curse. Therefore choose life so that you live, both you and your seed, to love Yahweh your Elohim, to obey his voice, to cling to him. For he is your life and the length of your days, to dwell in the land which Yahweh swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give them. Paul is not taking away from or doing it. He did take, metaphorically, he changed the wording a little bit, but it says the same thing. We should know that when he says to bring Messiah down, that he's referring to the Torah, to bring that in to our system, to bring it in. He says, but what does it say? The word is near you, back in Romans 10:8. In your mouth and in your heart, that is the word of belief which we are proclaiming, that if you confess with your mouth the Master Yeshua and believe in your heart that Elohim has raised him from the dead, you shall be saved. In the context of verse 6. Do not say in your heart, who shall ascend into the heavens to bring Messiah down, or who shall descend in the abyss, that is to bring the Messiah up. He's quoting Moses. He's saying, look, the Torah is what we're talking about here in the context of Messiah. So now let's say it differently. That if you confess with your mouth, verse 9, that the Master Yeshua, the walking, talking, living Torah, if you confess that with your mouth and believe in your heart that Elohim raised him from the dead, you shall be delivered. For with the heart one believes unto righteousness. What is righteousness? Doing the Torah, doing what's right according to Elohim. That is the definition of righteousness. He says, with the heart one believes unto righteousness, and one confesses with the mouth, and so is delivered. Of course, unless you don't keep doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're going to only be delivered at that moment, but not ultimately delivered. Because the scripture says, whoever puts his trust in him shall not be put to shame. But that's the key. Are you putting your trust in him? That was the whole covenant in Exodus 19. If you will trust to obey my voice in everything I say, I will take care of everything else. Do you put your trust in him? If you do, you will not be put to shame. He says, because there is no distinction. Now he's trying to say this. It doesn't matter what you were born if you come into this. There's no distinction between the Jew and the Greek. For the same master of all is rich to all those who are calling upon him. For everyone who calls upon his authority, the authority in the name of Yahweh, shall be delivered. But you can't call upon that authority unless you're walking this out. In John 14, Yeshua pretty much says that straight out. Okay, in John 14, I'm just going to quote that real quick and then we'll end. He says, if you love me, verse 15, and guard my commandments, then I shall ask of the Father. Why do we ask if we don't see that authority there? He says, you can't call upon a name. Oh, I'm sorry. He says, verse 13, and whatever you ask in my name, I shall do, in order that the Father might be esteemed. So whatever you ask in my authority, and if you ask whatever in my name, I shall do it, if you love me and guard my commands. Right? The authority in the name that Romans is talking about is the same thing Yeshua says here. If you go ahead and do things in my name and you do all this other stuff, I will do them if you're loving me and guarding my commands. If you're not, then I'm not. Is that clear for everyone? Okay? Let's see if I can get this in quick. Go back to Romans. How then shall they call on him in whom they have not believed? And how shall they believe in him in whom they have not heard? And how shall they hear without one proclaiming? And how shall they proclaim if they are not sent? As has been written, how pleasant are the feet of those who bring the good news of peace, who bring the good news of the good. However, not all obeyed the good news. For Isaiah said, wait a minute, the good news was going on in Isaiah's time. Oh, so this isn't just a New Testament thing. Isaiah says, Yahweh, who has believed our report. What report? That they need to be keeping the Torah and trusting Yahweh. So that Isaiah was dealing with the people that were not trusting their Creator. So then belief comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of Elohim. Oh boy, do Christian churches love to quote that verse, but they have no idea what they're quoting. And that's the problem. And we'll continue with this next week. Ended in verse 17. So what's 10:17? Okay, let's go ahead and pray. Father, we come before you. And wow, there's a whole lot of stuff going on here, and we're just so blessed to have this written word that you allowed us to have so we can seek you and understand you and have your instructions, your information in written form for us to study and piece together as you reveal yourself to us. And Father, please, we ask that you would strengthen us and help us to truly embrace and understand what the book is actually saying about you. What is Paul really saying? What was Isaiah saying? What was Moses saying? All the place. What was John saying? And what did Yeshua say in Matthew? How does that all piece together as we put this puzzle together? And so, Father, please, give us the strength to have the patience, the endurance to keep walking this forward and give you enough time as we stick it out for you to keep revealing and revealing for us the understanding that we need to give us that peace and shalom, that your way is the way and that your way is the path to the kingdom, that to eternal life, that we need to trust you with full emunah, with full belief, faith, and trust that you will do what you said you will do. And we will have what you promise us to have if we do our part. Father, we thank you and we praise you and we're humbled by all of this. And we're so excited about having relationship and not just information. Father, continue to finish the work in us as we lay ourselves before you in full faith and emunah. Father, we thank you and give you praise and glory and honor in the name above all names as we ask all things in his name, Yeshua our Messiah. Amen. Amen. Amen.